This program tells us about a senior who river rafts, scuba dives, and volunteers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Well, what's special about that, you may ask? What's special is that our guest spends his days on land in a wheelchair. Today's program is an inspirational story of overcoming a disability and about support and care. Diving back into life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program by and for seniors and devoted to exploring the many facets of those better years of our lives. The name of our program is inspired by a quotation from Robert Browning. Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made. Now, sit back and enjoy a program made especially to provide seniors with useful information, plus some lighter moments to brighten your day.
This is a program of courage, determination, and the loving encouragement of a support network. If you've had a life-changing accident and feel there's just simply no hope, we hope that our program will inspire you to be all you can be. You can do it. Hello, I'm Val Jeffery, and today my guests are Heather Weissel, a certified recreation therapist with the Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Val. Nice to be here.
And Marv Tuttle, a past patient who, despite his disability, is now a certified scuba diver and volunteers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Welcome, Marv.
Thanks, Val. Thank you for having us.
Marv, you're in a wheelchair because of an accident.
That's right, Val. About 4.5 years ago, while riding my motorcycle, I suffered a spinal cord injury. A car hit me at an intersection.
So Heather, what about the rehabilitation process? When does somebody come into your care?
Well, when a patient is ready for rehab, and by ready I mean that they are able to engage for at least 3 hours a day with a number of therapists, including a physical therapist and an occupational therapist, speech and respiratory therapists, that's the time when recreation therapists also get involved in a patient's care.
And who can benefit from recreational therapy?
Really anybody who has had a disability or a life-changing injury of some sort, who wants to get back into life to whatever degree of activity they were enjoying before their injury.
When you came into the hospital, what were your initial thoughts?
I think my biggest concern, because the injury was so overwhelming, I really couldn't understand that, but the things that I really could get in touch with quickly were my fear of a list of things that I thought I would probably never do again. In fact, I actually developed a list several pages long.
We begin with the patients by explaining to them the range of things we offer, including individual opportunities for leisure exploration. We do a lot of evening activities, which is really important for helping patients build their endurance so that they can start to establish a lifestyle while still in the hospital. We do that by going out into the community, going out for meals to restaurants and to the movie theater and to the mall, and all the way up to very extreme adventure type activities like downhill snow skiing and river rafting and scuba diving. And there's really no end to what's available. It's a question of what a person's willing to explore, and so those are the kinds of things that we emphasize.
So Marv, when did you first meet Heather?
Well, after my rehab in the hospital started, probably about 2.5 weeks after my injury, Heather was making pretty consistent rounds through the ward, introducing herself and inviting us to some of the functions that were going on within the hospital. Get-togethers in the evening, we had cooking classes, encouraging us to maybe get involved in swimming, and letting us know that there was a different facet to our therapy beyond the workouts that we were getting, that there was actually a recreational side. And so it was probably about 2.5 weeks after my injury when I first met Heather.
At what point do you introduce the pool therapy?
There are some diagnoses, for example, multiple sclerosis patients who really should not be in the water, but for the most part, the patients that we work with in spinal cord injury and in our other rehab units in the hospital, there is something to be gained by being in the water. Everything from the obvious, which is an opportunity for some physical activity. It's a great opportunity for people to do some lap swimming and really be very physically active. But even just to be free from the wheelchair, a lot of our patients say after they've been in the pool that what they liked most about it was the freedom from the chair, the ability to move their body with a much greater ease than they do on land, and just the comfort of it. It's a very warm, relaxing environment. Some patients get in the pool and spend 20 or 30 minutes doing essentially meditation, closing their eyes and floating and relaxing and really enjoying the gravity lessness, if that's a word, the gravity-free environment that they can't really appreciate on land. So there's something for everyone, really.
So explain the procedure. How does it start?
What we'll do is actually spend one time just coming down and having a tour of the pool where they can lay their eyes on the pool and see the mechanical lift that we'll use to get them in the pool, answer any of the questions they might have in the back of their minds about, well, how will this be and how will I float and what about my legs or the parts of my body that I'm not able to move independently, and we'll just talk through it so that when we do first get in the water, that all of the questions have really sort of been answered and we can really focus on the activity.
So Marv, did you have any concerns about getting into the pool with Heather?
I didn't have any concerns about getting into the pool with Heather because by this point I trusted her. My concerns lied in just how is it going to work. As Heather mentioned a moment ago, I swam prior to my accident. And so it was difficult for me to appreciate how I was going to perform the functions of swimming. My legs don't function. I have upper body being a paraplegic, so I wondered how would I utilize my legs? And the legs are a big part, especially when you're in deep water and you're trying to keep yourself floating. So those were where my concerns lied. But Heather made it clear that we were going to work through those things and work through those concerns, and we did.
Do you remember your thoughts after your pool therapy? What did you gain from this experience?
Probably the biggest thing that I gained and the thought that I had while I was still in the water and then it built when I got out of the water was I didn't feel disabled when I was in the pool. It didn't take very long to overcome that first fear that I had. And the first fear that you have every time you try something new as a disabled person. I got out and immediately thought to myself, what was I so worried about? And that was a big lesson for me, to come out and realize that there was concern, but there was a way to accomplish this.
Were there any negative aspects?
I think the only negative for me was that I realized immediately that I could do this, but I was going to have to do it differently. And the functions that I wanted to perform in the water were going to have to be addressed in a different way. And in the beginning, that was a negative for me, but I used it to a positive.
Would I be correct in saying that pool therapy was your first step back into life?
It was certainly one of the first. There were several steps that Heather was responsible for. My joy of cooking, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that again, so certainly Heather helped us with that. There were certainly other functions in the hospital too, therapeutic functions, but swimming and conquering that great unknown was certainly one of the biggest and first, yes.
So Heather, what preparations have to be made before someone can go home?
Before they go home? Well, each individual patient works very intensely with their physical therapist and their occupational therapist for many weeks, learning just how to function daily, how to move their bodies and move from one surface to the other. So they're really learning how to get along day by day, doing the kinds of things that we take for granted, getting dressed, bathing and moving, as I said, from the bed to the wheelchair and perhaps from the wheelchair to the car in order to go out and go to school and go to work and do the things that you'll need to do when you re-enter life. So the patient themselves is really learning in a very intense environment everything they need to know in terms of being able to care for themselves. The other two big things are that the patient needs to have a safe and accessible place to go home to. And so that's really where the families and the support network of the patient come into play. And they're working with support from our staff, our social workers and our case managers, and together with the patient themselves from the very beginning to identify where will we be going home to? Will we be able to go back to our home where we were living before? Will we need to look for a new place to live, perhaps, if patients are living in an inaccessible apartment, perhaps on a second story with no elevator? These are considerations. It's not a small thing to move. And when you're wrapped up in the emotional issues of a sudden injury and a life-changing injury, it's very hard, and we realize that we're asking a lot of patients and family members, and we're really trying as best we can from the very beginning to be honest and supportive of the families and the patients.
When you got home, what were your first thoughts?
Boy, that was I remember explicitly the first night I was sitting in my shower, managed to get into the shower for the first time at home, and I actually broke down, and my first thoughts were, my gosh, what have you done to yourself? I hurt myself in a recreational activity, and immediately questioned, what have I done, and how am I going to make this all work? At the time, I was almost 50 years old, and so obviously had a lot of life experiences to look back on. I didn't want to stop doing all those things, and all of a sudden I realized this is not going to be so easy. And in the hospital, where we have wide hallways, we have wide doorways, we have ease in getting around, we have help at the push of a button, all of a sudden when I first got home, I realized I don't have these luxuries, and now I've got to figure this thing out.
Your wife, Connie, must have been such a great support to you.
I've got to tell you, Val, I don't know how most of us would make it without that kind of support. Connie was willing to make adjustments. There were things that I couldn't do, literally, once again, things on that list that I had drawn up that I couldn't do myself in the beginning, that she had to do for me, and some of them weren't very tasteful things. But I made up my mind that those things were going to come off that list, but nevertheless, she was there for me, where some people who don't have that kind of support have to go outside the home to bring adaptive aid into the house. I didn't have to do that.
Heather, what emotional support is available?
Well, while a patient's still going through the rehab process, they are also being seen by psychologists and social workers, so there really is, as a part of the rehab process, a built-in support network. We also have a weekly on-site support group, which is run by our peer support counselor, who also runs a monthly group, which you attended last week. It's run by Richard Patterson.
My name is Richard Patterson, the peer support coordinator for traumatic brain and spinal cord injuries at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. I'm here today to talk with you about our support group at the Senior Cypress Center in San Jose. The Senior Cypress Center allows us to provide peer support services for people with traumatic spinal cord injury. We meet at the Cypress Center once a month. The people who attend the Cypress Center support group meeting are people with spinal cord injuries. There are those who have been injured for many, many years. There are those who are acutely injured. Additionally, we have people who family members are part of our support program. Here at the Cypress Center, we talk about a number of topics. We'll talk about adjusting to a spinal cord injury. We'll talk about recreational activities. We'll talk about sexuality issues. We'll talk about equipment here at the Cypress Center. We will talk about other activities around bowel, bladder. We'll also talk about current research that's being done with people with spinal cord injuries. We will cover a great deal of areas that assist people from all levels of injury, from all walks of life, to provide them with the most up-to-date support system possible.
Now, the support group meeting that I attended, it wasn't how I imagined it at all. There was a guest, he was a writer and a public speaker, and he was practicing a presentation on the group. And I was so surprised that the group really got involved and helped him modify his presentation. and it was very interesting, and it was a very enjoyable evening. Is that typical of a meeting, Marv?
It is. We try to have guest speakers at our monthly meeting. We have patients in that group that are of different degrees of time since their injury. And so we're all hungry for knowledge and hungry for information. And we also understand that we are a relatively small group. We're a small entity, and so we need that collective knowledge. Oftentimes those meetings we don't have a guest speaker, and it's just a round table. We have people in our group that have been in wheelchairs for over 50 years. We have people in our group that have been in wheelchairs for 6 months. So there's lots of exchange of knowledge, and so it's oftentimes just a roundtable discussion, or like you saw, where we have a guest speaker come in.
And Heather, you also coordinate outings and therapeutic activities for your outpatients. What kind of things do you do?
Well, we do outpatient programming for a wide range of our patient populations, and the things that we do on a relative consistent basis are overnight camping trips in the summer. We do a weekend downhill snow skiing trip every winter. We have done river rafting trips, which Marv was a participant in, and we have enjoyed some kayaking adventures, both day trips and overnight kayaking camping activities, which have been really a lot of fun.
Are there many companies in the area that actually specialize in that kind of activity?
Actually, there are both locally and statewide, and even nationally, there are a wide range of groups who specialize in our immediate area in San Francisco. There's a sailing group, the Bay Area Association of Disabled Sailors. There's a group that we used for kayaking called Environmental Traveling Companions. In the Santa Cruz area, there's a group called Shared Adventures. The group we do our snow skiing trip with is based out of Lake Tahoe, Disabled Sports USA. And those are just a few in our own immediate area. There's one in the East Bay. There's some all over in the Southern California area. And as I said, throughout the United States, Colorado has quite a bit of outdoor adventure programming. And really these groups, they are designed exclusively for planning group trips to enable people with disabilities to go out and experience wilderness and exciting adventure-based activity in a safe and comfortable environment. It's great.
So how long after the rehab did you and Connie sign up for the river rafting trip?
Well, as Heather mentioned earlier, sometimes we have to have the influence of our doctors involved in with spinal cord injuries, and it may differ from disability to disability, but with spinal cord, we're asked to wait a year post-injury before we can do activities like this. So we waited that time after the accident, so another 9 months or so, and then we were back to summer again, and so we signed up immediately. So it was about a year post-injury that we were able to do that for the first time.
What made you decide to do it?
Well, by that time, I was working on that list of not be able tos, and I was driven to find out what I could do and what I couldn't do. And I really wasn't too worried about what I couldn't do. I really wanted to find out what I could do. And I'd never actually gone river rafting in my whole life as an able-bodied person or as a handicapped person. So I really wanted to find out what it was all about.
Would you say that the hospital pool therapy gave you the confidence to do that?
Most definitely, because one of the concerns in whitewater rafting is falling out of the boat. And if I wasn't knowledgeable and prepared for what to do if that were to happen, I'm not so sure I would have been that willing to try it out. So definitely the experience while still in the hospital of swimming in the pool therapeutically was definitely a part of that decision-making process.
What were your impressions, and would you do it again?
My impressions were the same as when I went swimming for the first time. What was I so worried about? This was way more fun than I thought it was going to be, and I saw a lot of other handicapped people with different levels of injuries doing it as well. It really started to open up my thinking about adaptive sports and adaptive participation and recreation, and Heather knows how many times I've been bugging her now. The next time there's a trip planned, I want to be there.
So what other activities have you tried?
Well, actually, it's part of some of the groups that Heather mentioned. Through those organizations, certainly that's how I got reintroduced to scuba diving. We have done outrigger canoeing in the big Hawaiian outrigger canoes. We've done kayaking, and this last summer for the first time I tried surfing, which was really kind of a lot of fun. We also do off-road trail work. A lot of us like to attack some of the hills and valleys that we have around the area with wheelchairs that we've specially prepared to do off-road work, much like people would do in mountain bikes or running.
Well, you've done more than I have. Does your wife Connie participate in these activities with you?
In some. There's some of the things that she just doesn't really care to do, some that she does, but she's always with me. There's a certain degree of help that she can provide me with. For instance, in my scuba diving, helping me get some of my equipment on. She just loves to be with me, and I love to be with her. This year we celebrate 35 years of marriage, and I think that comes from doing things together, whether we literally partake in those activities or not.
Heather, do you find that outpatients are eager to try these activities?
Well, I think Marv actually hit it on the head, which is that I think most people have an inner desire to try something, but also an inner fear and worry about what will it be like and what limitations will be, in the way of participation. And also, just like with any of us, we have good intentions to go out and try something new, and we get busy with our regular lives. So it's really, I think, one of the most important roles of our discipline in recreation therapy to help help bridge the gap between these groups that offer these wonderful activities and the clients who are the end users who might on their own not get around to it or muster up the energy or the guts to go try something a little bit new or crazy or fun. And so by offering things in a group setting where patients might know that another patient who might be there for the first time will be coming along. And also, we generally will subsidize the program through fundraising efforts of ours. We'll make it a little bit more affordable so that at least the first time there's a sense of security because there's safety in numbers and knowing that there's a group going, and also, as I said, making it a little bit more accessible financially. And so I think that my experience is that people really do want to try things, but they just don't know how to get started. And so that's really a key part of our job, is to help make it a little bit safer and a little bit more accessible, and then hopefully we'll plant a seed, and then the individual will take it from there once they've had an experience with us to really, see where they can take it.
So Marv, scuba diving and cleaning the tank at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, it's a big leap from the therapy pool. Tell us how that came about.
Well, it really is, Val. It's a succession of accomplishments. It's the old baby step routine. Starting in the pool at the hospital was that first step, and then participating in functions, a day on the beach with shared adventures, and then at that point in time realizing maybe I can take this even further. So it's a progression of successes, and I think that's how that it all ties together.
So tell us what you do at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Well, at the aquarium, I'm often teased about the things that I will do there that I won't do at home, like washing windows, vacuuming the bottom of the exhibits. We hand feed a lot of the static animals and a lot of the swimming animals, and mostly maintenance type functions. And it's a volunteer role.
Well, getting into a wetsuit's not an easy thing for an able-bodied person. How do you do it? Have you got a secret?
There are some tricks. In my particular instance, where I do have some range of motion, and I tend to run warm, I'm usually warm in any activity I'm doing, I could afford to get into a wetsuit that's a little bit bigger than I should be wearing. So the fact that it's a little bit bigger, it's easier for me to get on. There are some tricks that we use for folks to get them into wetsuits that have minimal range of motion. We put plastic bags over their feet and coat their legs with dishwashing liquid, and their wetsuits pop right on. Yeah, so there are some tricks.
Don't bubble in the water then with all the washing up liquid?
Yeah, we try to use biodegradable detergents so that we don't disturb the environment. Yeah.
Well, from your inpatient pool therapy, your first trip down the river, and your participation in outpatient programs, to your current involvement with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, do you feel there's any connection between those?
Once again, the comment I made earlier, it's that definite progression of successes. You have to be willing to try certain aspects of an activity. If scuba diving means you probably should know how to swim, then you take on all those little incremental pieces to build toward the big picture. So I think there's definitely a tie between all those functions. My experience now at the aquarium is fairly young. I hope to progress beyond that and do some open water diving for the facility. I have to aspire to that. So definitely, it's a matter of a building block type approach, I think.
So do you have any words of wisdom for somebody that might be in hospital now in your situation?
Definitely, I think, certainly I know a lot of people with the same injury type that I have. I also have a lot of friends with other types of disabilities, and I think what I have learned most is that there's definitely life after a devastating injury or illness, and to certainly don't forget, as hung up as we get on our injury and disability, don't forget our friends and loved ones. They suffer right along with us. In fact, my wife Connie has been instrumental in putting together family peer support. There is peer support functions as well for family members. So look at it as a doable function, that there is life after your injury and life after a devastating disease. And don't forget those around you. Don't get so self-centered that you forget those that you love.
Well, you're a remarkable man, and I can see that you and Connie are a great team. And we hope that your story will inspire others to follow your example, and I thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Val. Appreciate the opportunity.
Heather, the staff and the families and other support groups obviously play such a vital role in the recovery, and you're all doing a great job, and we thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of The Better Part, thank you both for coming today.
Thanks a
You're
lot.
welcome. Thanks, Val.
We hope that you've enjoyed our show and you'll be with us in the weeks to come. If you'd like to be part of our crew or have a suggestion for a program that might interest you, let us know. We can be reached at the Cupertino Senior Center. Goodbye.